Hello, everyone. My name's Jack Burns, the founder and head coach of Edge Rowing, where we get busy professionals rowing to the best versions of themselves. I'm also the co host of this show, the Edge Rowing podcast, where we have conversation with industry leading specialists, coaches, and athletes. We keep you, the listener, as the priority. Our objective is to share these conversations and stories so that by the end you have simple, clear, and relatable pieces of actionable advice. Time now for me to pass it over to our coach and co host, Taylor Perry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Edge Rowing podcast. We have a very special guest today. We are joined by Julian Bahain. Julian is a three-time Olympian and an Olympic bronze medalist, representing both France and Canada on the world stage. He is a two-time European champion. He is a two-time Pan American champion. He's a four-time world medalist in the men's quad and the men's double. Julian has also rowed across the Atlantic, and he also competes in coastal rowing. And you can check him out later this summer as a broadcaster with CBC. So welcome, Julian.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Really happy to be with you and kind of share a bit of my journey.
Yeah, it's been really great catching up with you. Julian and I were teammates for a number of years, and he was a great asset to our national team training out in Canada, and he and I also became pretty good friends. So it's interesting. You started in France, but you now call the West Coast your home. So can you tell us a little bit about your connection between both countries?
Yeah, well, my mom is Canadian, my dad's French, so kind of grew up with between the two countries, I would say. So it's I have connections on both sides of the Atlantic, and yeah, that's kind of like really shaped my approach to what I do, where I live now. Also having the flexibility to live between the two countries. That's definitely a plus to have two passports.
Yeah.
And I think my approach to this call it an adventure kind of like led me to discover when like to go on both sides of the Atlantic and really try to explore the sport in a different way, because maybe we'll get into this, but it's quite interesting to see how different for the same sport, how different the approaches can be.
Yeah, we definitely want to do a deeper dive into just how different rowing is just in North America and in Europe. I'm actually curious as to when you started. So, are you the only rower in your family? Were you introduced to it by somebody or through school? And where exactly did you start?
Yeah, well, I started in Angers, which is like it's a mid-sized city in France, like on the west coast of France, northwest coast. Yeah, no, I was the first rower in my family. Started, I grew up very fast, and my family doctor said, "Well, you're going to have to swim or row because that's kind of like a supported type of sport with low impact sport, and you need to get your core developed." And there's a rowing club and a swimming club in my town, so kind of gave me the two options, and it may come as a surprise for some people, but I'm not really great with water. In
Really?
the water, so I kind of have a little bit of a water phobia. I think I grew up with water phobia, and I'm not a great swimmer, and I'm not really comfortable in water. So I really picked rowing just out of options. That was the last one there, so it's like, okay, let's go and row. So that's how I pushed the door of the local rowing club in 1999, and yeah, it's been guiding my life pretty much since then.
And you're obviously still involved with the sport, so you're going to be doing some broadcasting later this summer. But you also still compete in coastal rowing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting with the sport, again, I got into rowing a little bit forced, as I just said, because of back issues. But really got to love the sport. Really got to enjoy the sport for what it is. And now I got like actually two sisters also rowers, and went on to kind of be pretty successful as national team athletes, and just now also kind of enjoying the sport for what it is. And I think for me, as I'm a family, one of five kids, and it was really not an outlet, but a way to kind of do something outside of the family, right? And really created those roots in the sport. Again, that love for the sport. So what's really great is that now the sport is not just 2,000 meter at a high level. it's all of the other regattas that we had. That's all of the other disciplines of the sport that I actually came to enjoy as well. Like, it can be a head of the Charles that is a totally different distance, or Heineken in Amsterdam, where it's a different format as well. And coastal rowing is something that I came to discover, and even though it was pretty big in France, and actually it started in France originally, and in the UK as well. So it's like, got to know the sport a bit differently. Helped organize the World Championships here in Victoria in Canada, the Coastal Championships in 2018. And then I actually have a property on the ocean here, and to me it became kind of something normal to, or logical, or kind of easy to say, well, you know what, let's go out there, let's enjoy the sport as well for what it is, or what it can be, which is touring and going around the islands and doing beach sprints. So now beach sprints has actually become an Olympic event in the 2028 Olympics. So the sport is booming on that side. It's just another inlet into the sport, or can be an outlet for some of us. You do 2,000 meter, and now you kind of like, I'm going to go and explore that side of the sport. And you see it in other sports, such as cycling, where people can go from mountain biking to road cycling, or other sports like that. So I think that's a great opportunity. And yeah, I mean, am I still competing at a high level? I would say no. Am I still competing? Yeah, because I just like be at the start line and getting that little feeling.
Well, I see your Strava posts every now and then, and I can confirm that you do in fact still have it. So it's
Thanks. Yeah, it's a hay in the barn. I think 17 years at like training at high level, getting to that point of being at the pinnacle of my career, and I would say physical shape. It's for sure have like the leftover from a strong VO2 max, and I think I'm really now kind of trying to stay fit, and yeah, just having some fun. I mean, I'm not aiming for anything big. I'm just like enjoying the sport for what it is and what it brings to me, which is it's a family, right?
That's right. So have you ruled out the LA games in 2028 for beach sprints?
Well, you never say never. That's what my rule. I think what is pretty good right now is being part of developing the sport. For me, it's like, if I can contribute by pushing some athletes to kind of get better. I mean, I've been there, I've done that. It's not my goal to be at the Olympics. I know what it takes to be at the Olympics, but if right now it helps the younger generation to kind of have a little bit of competition as the sports grow, and it will grow. Just being out there, and I can kick a couple butts along the way. It's fun.
Well, I'm sure you can. Okay, so you started rowing when you were about 13 in France. So how does the development system in those sort of formative years work in France? Like, did you do it through your high school or just through a local club?
Yeah, the sports systems are quite different between obviously North America and Europe, and I think the UK and France are pretty similar in that sense, that they have a strong club system. It's more people in less area, and more clubs, more history in that sense. So there's not a strong university or school system to get through the sport. Though the UK has a little bit of a bigger system, but I think if you go through the ranks of like starting at a club when you're younger, and that's how you learn the sport. It's pretty rare to see people show up in the sport at 18 plus, at least in France. You start as a young junior, and then you kind of like learn the sport, and at some point you become a little better. And there's a big France has a good centralized system in how they propose both competition as well as training programs. And so it's pretty easy to, if you're in a club, to kind of see the path to get to the higher level, and there's a strong history of the trials on that day, on that weekend, and a training program that has been vetted through and improved through the years, but it's publicly available for everyone. And it's really easy to pick it up, and in a way, if you do that, you should be good at some point.
So when did you know that you were good? When did you know that you could take this to the next level and try out for a national team in France and potentially go on to an Olympic Games? Like, was that like a definitive moment in your career, like a result that you got, or was it like a year-long process where you were just fostering that dream?
I think I can vividly remember that moment when I was like on the water in my hometown, and then I could see my coach just smile and be
Mm.
silent as I was rowing, and I remember stopping and saying like, "Why are you smiling like this? Like, what's wrong?" It's kind of like almost like, "What's wrong?" And I was like 15, so it was like 2 years after I started, and that year for some reason, just for context here, I ended up rowing the single scull because it's kind of by like same as in Canada. It's got the categories are by 2 years, right? So I kind of started. I had like a big group. We rode the sculling eights, and as a junior, we call like junior C here or like minime in France, and then went into the next category, which would be junior B in Canada. And it's like, well, everyone was still in junior C, or they were already kind of older, and it was only three of us. And I ended up there. The two of them rode the pair; they were older, and then I rode the single. And so that's for context. And I started doing this, and then that year, really, my score starting to get better. But I was just like, I wanted to go to national. That's what I wanted to do. I had no real expectations more than that. And then, so that moment, my coach was smiling. I was rowing. I stopped and said, "What's wrong?" And he said, and I remember him saying, I think you're going to be great in this sport."
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm 15, and I'm like, for better or worse, because at that point I'm also 15, teenager, kind of thinking, oh, I can be a big shot now, as well as I think it instilled in me the confidence that if I worked hard and with the same mindset, I would actually become great. So, someone recognizing this in me kind of helped me at that point in time. In critical years when you're junior like this, it's it can go left, right, or center. You can quickly just disappear from the sport, stop, or have different expectations or different aspirations for yourself. And for me, it was really like, oh, I can do this. And again, back to the family concept. For me, the sport and rowing was a way to, get out there, discover the world, travel, like, go camping with, like the regattas would like put the boats on the roof and, go camping and race in whatever city in France. And as to me, it was the sense of adventure, and then suddenly the sense of being greater. And I think it helped both at that point in time for me to focus, and then results started to follow in a way. So I think it's the coach at that point in time recognizing this. It could have been wrong, again, it was on me as well to make it happen, not just that, but I think he recognized that moment. It's like there's something in this kid.
Yeah, that's incredible. Especially, I think the validation of having somebody point that out for yourself can almost validate those feelings that you have on your own. So yeah, that's really incredible. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's what's interesting as well. We talk always about the gift and the work, and I think the gift can be there, and I do think someone recognized that I had a gift. I could move a boat. I had, I think, probably, and I know that, like, physiological like abilities and a gift for, I mean, rowing or maybe other sports, but definitely for rowing. But then you still have to put on the work, right? And that
right.
doesn't, so by saying this, he probably knew as well, played, the mental game as well, kind of saying, well, I know he's a hardworking guy. And on
Mhm.
top of it, I know he's gifted. And it's kind of like putting, the little coin in the machine, just say, okay, now I'm going to, and maybe that was genuine. I'm pretty sure it was genuine because that moment was genuine. But I think that created that strong feeling for me that, I could push a little bit further in the sport.
And you took it really far too, which is incredible. So your first world championships was what year was that? Would that have been 2005, 2006?
Well, the first ones were like as a junior, like I did the world championships in Athens in 2003, where my experience there was actually I came back home with a bronze medal on 1,000 meter because the boats were sinking, and that was the year before the 2004 Olympics on the Olympic course, and it was really windy. We were racing at like 5-6 a.m. to kind of, and then boats were sinking, and ended up going on 1,000 meter, but still brought a bronze medal home, which was great. And again, validating the work at that point in time. I think I was third that year at trials and single scull, and then kind of like, went on, like that was my first year as a junior A in a way, and then kind of 2004 it was a Banyoles in Spain, and really wanted to row the single scull. I won trials with like a large, by quite a margin. Was pulling like 603 or 605 on the erg. Like I was like, a strong junior, right? And really wanted to go out there and show the world in single scull. In the end, I ended up rowing the quad for some reasons. The federation wanted, us to row the quad, and that's interesting. Like I'll just mention this here, maybe if some juniors are listening to this, is I remember being really pissed that could not, that the federation made a choice of pushing me into the quad, where I like had won trials by like more than 10 seconds. I went to Munich at the regatta there, and actually the guy became world champion. I was like right there with him, like within seconds, and it's like I knew I could have had a medal probably, and I mean I know there's a high chance that I could have had a medal as a junior in the single scull, maybe winning, right? But they pushed me in the quad. And they pushed me in the quad. We can't talk about the politics behind and how they did it, which was pretty bad. But I reacted really poorly. Like I know that because I was like, a young, cocky, kind of like, teenager in a way. And I didn't want to row the quad with those guys. Like they were slower than me. I didn't want to row it. And I wouldn't say I sabotaged it, but I don't think I put my best foot on the thing. And I mean, being a competitor at the end, I gave it my best at the end, but I was like really reluctant at the beginning of the summer, and didn't really work for me. But then looking at the bigger picture, I'm like, I know why the federation did it. They had this U23 quad that was doing well. They were world champion in 2003. They just qualified the games in 2004, and there was really a plan to get a quad at the Olympics in 2008. And so they were trying to get scullers, young scullers, to feed that process. They could have told me that way. Maybe I would have maybe understood that. But in bigger picture, if you're listening there, it's like this, the lessons learned here is like, it helped me, be an Olympic medalist 4 years later. And I know that because rowing the quad 2 years in a row at World Championships as a junior, and then getting to the senior rank and actually being able to, 2005, being at the elite in Jufu. I was in Jufu, and I was, in the A final of the men's quad at the World Championships as a 19-year-old. And it's because I did those years rowing in the quad, learning how to win, learning how to lose, and being part of a bigger crew and bigger scheme in a way to get to the Olympics and win. So anyway, you should always kind of think big picture. I look at it from now, my perspective, I'm like, yeah, I think that was the right thing to do. And I'm thankful for those who actually took maybe, got the heat of my temper at the time. But anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you for that insight. That's going to be really helpful to a lot of people. And just to add to that, I think it's always difficult to see the forest from the trees when you're because most athletes are, you're so tunnel visioned and so focused on what your goal is that you think, oh, as soon as I sort of deviate from this path that I'm on, I have now no control over anything that's happening. So it sounds like you had like pretty good mental focus and drive for wanting to be successful. And then as soon as all these other parts started coming in, that's when you sort of went, oh, wow, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do this. But as you said, it actually ended up propelling you forward into some really good success later on.
Yeah. And I think the other lessons as well here for, on the other side, which, would be the coaches or the, board or whoever members, of the support team are there to kind of support the athletes to succeed. Communication is key. And as an athlete, as you said, you tunnel vision, you get your path, you kind of have your goals, but communicating on those goals, making sure that you understand why you're putting an 18-year-old in a quad right now, even though, you may have promised, 6 months before that if you do this, you'll have that. Well, that's the role of the coach, the role of, a high performance director or whoever, to kind of communicate that strategy clearly to the athletes so that there's buy-in and understanding that this is the goal, this is the plan. And I think it goes both ways. Athletes also need to communicate. Maybe sometimes because we're tunnel vision, because we're, A-type, maybe we may communicate a bit, or sharply, or kind of have our perspective on the matter. But I think it doesn't prevent people from both sides to communicate. And I think that's what makes a great team as well, is if you communicate the goals, if you communicate about pros, cons, in the process, and be open to answering those questions as well. Ask the hard questions. Like an athlete that asks questions, it's not an athlete that is like trying to be a problem. It's an athlete that's trying to understand what is the path forward, like understanding the forest rather than just staying on the tree, right? And it's like,
Right.
to me, getting the answer is I just may, go left or right, or just, help me understand what I'm doing in the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit to 2007, 2008. So
Yep.
you're in the quad now. You win a silver medal in Munich, which obviously you've now qualified for your first Olympic Games. You would have been, I guess, around about 20, 21 years old at that point. Yep. And you're now looking forward to going to your first Olympic Games. So can you tell us a little bit about the lead up to that year? And did you have any shifts in mentality now that you knew you were about to perform at the greatest sporting event that the world's seen? Or what was your process like in the lead up to that Games?
I think we were very fortunate to have a very strong sculling team on the French team at that point in time. We had, Adrien Hardy, Jean-Baptiste Maquet. Like Adrien was like Olympic champion in 2004 in the double. We had they were world champion in 2006. In 2007, like both boats are still medalists, kind of just up there with the best. So you have like 6-7 scullers. When you have the A final of the trials in France in the single scull, you have like world and Olympic medalists, 100% of them just on the start line, just pushing the boundaries. Like in a way, we're pushing the sport. And
Wow.
Those years, like that's where we're breaking our national records and all of this, because there was like this, I mean, healthy, sometimes a little unhealthy, I'm gonna have to say. You kind of like this. There's definitely an internal battle, but you knew that if you were a little faster than your peer, you were actually in the world medals, right? So that really helps set that mindset. But at the same time, it almost felt like everything was logical and coming together. It's not that I was like, oh gosh, I'm going to the Olympics now. It's like, no, the Olympics it must happen. It has to happen. It's just now it's like we want to win,
step.
right?
Yeah.
And like everything else, if you're in your couch and you look at the Olympics, yes, it's daunting because it seems so unreal. But when you've been, working at it every day and you just make those gains and actually you're there and everything becomes in a way natural. It's logical, right? There's not like something that's like out of the blue. So I'm not in 2007, 2008. I'm like, yeah, we've qualified the boat. We have this strong team. We know that if we all perform, domestically, logically, it will be good, internationally. So yeah, felt pretty good about the process for sure. Up until I would say the trials in 2008, where it was like a big shift in our team. And I think it always back to communication and open, transparent processes. It happened that year that the son of the high performance director was on the team. He was part of that sculling group as a spare. And there was a big push from the father, and I'm going to say it. I don't have any, I'm getting older now, so maybe I can say it, but it's kind of like, yeah, it's like there was a push to put the son in the boat. Right. And it was a boat that was performing. And so it became very apparent to us that there was a push to kind of bend the rules to get someone in the boat, which was done. It was not easy. And it's always on the gray line. It's always a gray line, right? It's like when you have two people that are exactly the same or pretty much the same, or it becomes what do you bring to the boat? What is the dynamic? It becomes almost mental and relationship more than actual physiological, performances or even speed on the water. It's like you have two people that are the same, but you go with person A or person B, and it becomes what do you can't. And I've always said you can't really row with your friends all the time because otherwise you don't perform. But at some point you're kind of like, well, is that friendship bringing something else on top of, everyone performs, everyone's good. But anyway, ended up at the Games with not the boat that was the 05 to 07 kind of lineup. Another lessons learned for us in terms of how to process things. But that part though shaped the next quadrennial. Maybe we can get into this, but it becomes, a different approach to, okay, I'm not going to be dictated who is going to perform with me.
Right.
I want the best. I don't want anyone to be able to question the lineup. So that was the approach for the next quadrennial. But in the end, saved the face, managed to go home with a bronze medal from Beijing, which was pretty incredible. But if I look at all my performances, am I proud of this one? I'm proud because I came back home with an Olympic medal, and that's the only one I have. But definitely not the best experience to get there because of those internal kind of challenges. But
right, and it seems like well, it's so funny. You say it's your only Olympic medal, but I was reading through the statistics of it, and I don't know if people really understand the scope of being able to perform on that level, because there's 7 or 8 billion people in the world, and there's 10,000 people that go to the Olympic Games, and maybe 1,000 of them every games get a chance to come in the top 5. And I think there's only been something like 12 or 1,300 gold medalists in the history of the modern games from 1896. So that's an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. But also, too, you raced against a really formidable crew from Poland, which I'm pretty sure was unbeaten in the 4 years leading up to that. So how did racing against them sort of change the event? Because quite oftentimes you'll have crews come around like the U.S. women's 8 or the German men's 8 in the lead up to London, or like the Kiwi pair that just sort of completely change the rules of the game. So how did racing against them affect your event, would you say?
yeah, I think I don't know if they changed the game at that point in time, but they were definitely bringing a level of consistency to how the men's squad was being raced by having that super consistent crew always performing at a high level, which I think, and at that time, I remember looking at all the stats and all of this, and there were some, but not to that extent. And they were like unbeaten the same way the Kiwi pair, as you said, kind of like, it's like, okay, they're the new standard and they're able to repeat. What are they doing that is different, right? And what can we learn from that? And I would say now it has changed again to a certain degree. And I was just talking to a Dutch friend, like Dirk, was in the men's squad in Tokyo, like fantastic Dutch squad. Like I think
One of
that's
the best
actually
crews I've ever seen.
exactly, and I think that too. But when you talk to them, well, I talked to him. It's funny to say that they used that 2004 to like 2008 era of us, and you always think of like you were an inspiration along with the Polish and how you kind of brought the sport to a different level of technical kind of component. And then I think now it's kind of almost like the technical part of the quad has been kind of dealt with, and now it's like physical on top of it and mental. So I think there's like that cycle was definitely a learning curve in terms of like how to row the quad. And you see it with like how the Australian then were taking it, like how the the Poles, and like how it has shaped 08 to 2012, and the Croatian as well. So it's like there's been like a good evolution of like consistency of how the quad is rowed. And then the one thing though that I mentioned is that they lost once, well actually twice, at the World Cup that year. I think it was pretty impressive in 2008. They got beaten by the U.S. in Lucerne, and then by the Italian and ourselves, and on their home tour, on their in Poznan, their last World Cup before the games. And what's pretty impressive is how they managed to bounce back and win the games when there was like actually now the quads were catching up. The patrol was catching up on them. And yeah, we learned a couple things. What's interesting is that there was, if you look at those races, we're rowing like actually pretty low rate compared to what is rowed today. I think that's been a major shift in the last 4 years, let's say, of rowing. It's kind of like now that technical component is dealt with, and they're able to actually not do it at 34, 35, but now quads racing at 38 to 40 is normal, which, to me is kind of like we're not doing this back then. But anyway, it's incredible crew, and I have lots of respect for those guys. I actually stay in touch with Adam Kroll, and like he's a great guy, and yeah, that's good memories.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I know for myself because I raced the quad twice at under 23s, going back and looking at that era was something that was really helpful, just understanding the rhythm of the boat and understanding it really is an 8 with 4 people in it, and it's just about as fast too. So,
yeah.
and I know when you came and joined the Canadian national team, I was like, who is this guy? And I had to sort of figure out who you are, and I was like, oh wow, this guy's actually very accomplished, and that sort of segues into the next part, which is 2009. You team up with your teammate from the quad, Cedric Perez, and you guys go into the men's double, and you had a incredibly impressive run for the next 4 years. You medaled at just about every World Cup, every European Championships, and every World Championship. So was that? I know you mentioned earlier that you wanted to have, you wanted to pick, exactly who you wanted to be with, and it was all going to be based on performance. Was that something that you and Cedric had talked about, or was it just a matter of, the two of you were finishing first and second at trials, and then you paired up together? How did that work?
Yeah, I think the shift there was really around, you mentioned performance, and I'm going to sound like a dinosaur now, but it's like, the early 2000s were really, there was a shift in equipment. There was, that was the end of the Eastern kind of, I said Germany, at least in France, like Eastern Germany influence from the programs, like the way of trainings, like all of that. And then it like had brought like that level of consistency of performance. And then, we got to 2008 and we were able to get that quad on the podium. Like we could feel like, the group was strong. However, you could see like everyone, there was a change in, especially the Anglo-Saxon way of training. And then performance not just became a matter of like, you do that training program and you're going to be good, but it's more like, what are the other components of performance? And that's why, you started talking. I mean, I know it sounds like a dinosaur, but like nutrition started to become a thing. Mental, coaching started becoming a thing. High performance was not just about doing the old stuff and repeating, but really kind of like, how do you challenge yourself on your own training program? Like, how do you challenge yourself and individualize your training program? And then at that point in time, the French system was not really conducive to this. And not saying it was not performing, but you could feel it was kind of like struggling to catch up. And that's where, I mean, we've seen it now. All the young, like the smaller nations have actually made a dent. Like we would have never seen those Irish or, some Chilean, pairs, or like all those countries, they're catching up. And then, so those big nations like GB and France and Germany and like, well, I was feeling like we can't just repeat what we're doing. If I want to be gold medalist, I have to change incrementally something and just keep searching performance in a different way.
That's right.
To answer the question then is like, what we were doing is like, okay, I get some people kind of dictating my performance by kind of not really setting the rules clear. So I need clear rules. I need to look at other ways of performing, mentally, physically, in terms of nutrition, all of this. So what am I going to do to do this? There were also like some people taking, a break of rowing and stuff. So we decided, okay, 2009, going to row the quad. Going to row the double. And the rules were like, yeah, first and second at trials in the single. And then, like for us, it was like whoever's going to join. Like I didn't have I'm going to row with my friend, but more like, how can we set the rules that are pretty clear and then go out there? So we won the trials with Cedric, and then at that point in time, kind of started looking at how can we leverage, our Olympic medal as well. You've got sponsors. It's not just about the money. For me, it's kind of like, okay, how can I use now that money that I generate to actually perform and invest in my next steps and, communications and nutrition and coach, like mental coach and all this. So we're starting like hiring those people, working with some people to kind of create the next thing, which was 2009, pretty cutting edge actually. And in France, we made a lot of, I would say enemies, but people were really questioning our approach. And we're kind of like the dissidents, the revolutionary kind of like group, kind of like looked at as being like, we're carving ourselves out of the system. And that was not really well perceived. But I was like, well, if I stay in the system, I'm going to find the limit. I've already pretty much found the limitation of the system. So I needed to kind of push it. That created a lot of tension within the system. So that's maybe the next part of our discussion. We'll go there as to why I came to Canada as well. But that tension was created at a point in time. However, to your point, to me, it was like we were consistently performing now. We were able to be like on every single pretty much podium and medals. Like that was like, those were the great years. Like I was just like going there and performing and just, ups and downs, winning, losing here and there. But like losing was the third place and sometimes the fourth place. But that was the worst, right? Compared to before where it was like ups and downs between a B final and an A final. Now it's like, we're showing up, we're going to get a medal. And it's pretty powerful mentally when you get there and how we set up that process. I relocated in France to now row in the training center and trying to create with us that system of, it's not just two people, it's like to create a double, we need that quad behind, we need those other people to push us, right? And yeah, that's the lead up to London. Up to London, yeah, it was like medals after medals, and even the World Cup just before London, we were still up there in the medals.
That's right. Yeah. So you obviously really took it into your own hands, and I guess it just goes to show that the reason why you're on the world stage to begin with is because you do all the big things really well. But the difference between somebody being a competitor and somebody being a champion is being able to do all the small things really well. And it seems like you guys both took that in stride.
Yeah. And again, the rule is pretty clear: is we have to perform. It's like there's no kind of like not performing well at some point, or if there is, well, there's a chance for someone else to. We want it to be challenged. Again, it's like if you're pushed, you perform. If you don't, it's part of the game, right?
And the double is such a viciously competitive event. I mean, it seemed like even just going back and watching some of your old races, it seemed like almost every World Cup or European Championships, or I mean, maybe the exception of one World Championships, it was always different people on the podium, or at least one crew was still consistently on there, just moving around.
Yeah, well, it was especially super tight. Like there may have been consistency in like who won because obviously New Zealand that quadrennial was like winning, but it's really around the field, how tight the field was, and losing 2 seconds was not losing two places. It was like losing, not being in the A final, the B final, and being in the B final, right? So
That's
really tight.
That's incredible. And you look at some of the people who were in that event too. I mean, you had Stefan Kruger and Hans Gruner from Germany. You obviously had the Kiwi pair in there as well. So you had some like pretty top competitors in those years. So
yeah, each talk like the Slovenian, they were like
That's
Chop
right, yeah.
and Spick, and like all those guys were super competitive, best best of the best in the double, and demonstrated that over years. So no, it was an honor to raise those guys, and lots of respect for what we did, for sure.
Okay, so the London Olympics comes around, and you and your partner get pushed out in your semifinal.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Eaton Dorney is notoriously unfair when the wind is not in your favor, and obviously that must have been a devastating result for you. What was your mindset like prior to that when you guys showed up? Because you guys had obviously been doing enough work to know that you could, win a medal, if not win the whole thing. But then to, fall short because of the conditions, obviously that must have been really tough for you. So how did you process that whole thing?
Well, the one thing I'll say is it's, I will not blame the conditions for the reason why.
Okay.
Because I mean, it was a factor for sure, and we didn't get lucky. However, it took me, I think, 7 years before watching that final. It took me 7.
Wow. Uh-oh.
And did I break up? Sorry.
Yeah, you did. Could you just go back and start again? It took you 7 years.
Yeah, it took me 7 years to watch that. Well, I'm breaking up. Sorry, it's saying your internet connect. Are you okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I was saying, yeah, it took me 7 years to watch that men's final. I knew the results, but I didn't want. I couldn't watch it, and I couldn't watch it because I really felt why I failed, and we can get into that after. But for me, Dorney, when we talked about the small things, was I fit? Yes. Was I able to go and perform out there? Absolutely. I just demonstrated it a couple months before, and you look at the results and you see the podium from Lucerne, the last World Cup. Everyone was in the B final. The Australian, the German, we were all like the Norwegian, ourselves. We were all in the B final. So yes, Dorney was unfair, and there's no doubt about it. However, mentally, and I've not talked about this with the other crews that were in the B final, but mentally, when you have such a tight field and 2 seconds makes such a difference, it all becomes a matter of not just luck, but what do you do? What do you do with your unluck in a way?
Mm.
And all the respect and credit to the New Zealand crew. If you look at where they were actually, like where they were in the semifinal and how they won the final, at what lane they won the final, again, they were not on the right side of the fence. They were not, and they won. The Italians should have won that day because
Right.
they were actually closer to, they were actually really protected, and they got the silver medal. But again, I'm not trying to say it's all about that. I think it becomes a matter of how you approach a race, and we did not approach that mentally in the right way. And I think for a lot of reasons leading up to that, the tensions in the team, the inability to rise to the challenge. Like I was mentally not there, and I think it was hard. And because the expectations were for us to medal and win, we ended up, not. I think the weight was on our shoulder, and we looked at the result before looking at actual race. And then on top of it, you had the wrong lane at the wrong time, and you just go backwards. So it is what it is.
So as part of your therapy for getting over that, was rowing across the Atlantic one thing that helped with that?
I don't know if it helped. I think it was definitely the trigger. And of course, came back devastated from 2012. Came home. The phone was not ringing. Nothing was really happening. Everything that I had planned for myself was, went down the drain. Sponsors started letting me, telling me that they were not going to renew and all of that. And so at that point in time, I'm like, I need a year off. Like I can't, like mentally, I'm drained.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. So I'm taking a year off for sure. And the phone rang, and then Patrick, which I met at a charity, called and said, "Hey, like, so blah blah blah. How you? I hope you're okay. I'm sure you're disappointed. Well, I'm looking for someone, like, I'm trying to beat the world record going across the ocean. Like, I'm looking for a good rower. Like, would you come with me and let's plan this?" And I'm like, at that point in time, I was like, well, that could be the way to, like, the redemption could come from this. Like, let's prove the world that I'm actually the gold medal that I am supposed to have is in that performance.
Right.
So I approached that in a totally different and wrong way. And I'm going to say it in a wrong way. I went out there thinking, this is my way to get my gold medal that I didn't get, and keep my sponsors kind of like active and give them something where they can have the platform they were supposed to have. So here we go. I just like went in there, kind of said, I get a year off. We can row between December and February, basically, to go across the Atlantic. So I'm like, it's September, and I'm like full on 4 months, never been on the ocean, know nothing but ocean rowing and open ocean rowing. But I just went out there with like the determination of an Olympic athlete, but the craziness of maybe the Julian that should think twice before saying yes to certain things. But I went in there and kind of hit the wall pretty hard for sure, because you don't go out there. Like, the reason why I was going out there was pretty much what was wrong. I learned it the hard way. You don't perform the same way. It's not a 2,000-meter controlled kind of environment. If Eaton if Eaton was like at the wrong lanes, well, on the ocean, it's like there's no room for, like you don't control anything. Just the winds and the currents and the waves just dictate how fast you go. And so trying to go out there, beat the world record, demonstrate to the world that I'm the best athlete ever was wrong. And I learned it the hard way in the middle with storms and not beating the world record, and actually learning a ton about myself at that point in time for sure.
Okay, so you started a swim club, you started a rowing club, and you're afraid of the water, and then you try to row across the ocean. So did you conquer your fear at any point in that of the water?
Oh no, still not.
That's
I think
that's incredible. And now you live on an island.
Yeah, now I live on an island and I boat every day. And yeah, I mean, I do have an attraction for water, but because I think it's I fear water, and I think it's kind of like, to me, it's a way to feel alive for sure. But I mean, I pretty reasonable, and really, I'm the kind of guy that wears my life jacket every time I get too close to it. Like I'm this kind of guy. So it's like risk is not uh just going out there and being being foolish. It's about like, okay, how do you mitigate and manage risk? So yes, I went on the ocean. Was I scared? Absolutely. I think yeah, I'm you go out there and you're on the water. I'm trying not to be in the water, and that went well. I mean, mentally it was really tough. And not only because of the water being around, but just, again, not being out there for the right reasons. And learning about myself, that the I did not uh why I did not perform well, and how I got to the point of isolating myself within the team. And I think I discovered that I need people. I'm actually a pretty social kind of animal,
Mm-hmm.
and well, I'm a pretty type A, and I know what I want. I rely heavily on others, and performance to me is kind of like really embrace the fact that it's not just about me and my performance, but about how we interact as a team. It's all about the journey. I know it sounds crazy, like people say, oh, it's normal to say this, but I had to learn that. I had to learn that it was about the journey, that you perform at the end because that journey was just worth it. And if you don't perform, doesn't mean that the journey was useless.
That's right.
You learn things along the way. And to me, it was reassessing, talking about performance. It was reassessing that notion of performance,
Mm.
and that, I'm as proud of my first years when I had, tons of medals, all the way to kind of like what I learned in Canada and where I'm at right now. And though maybe on the paper the results are different, I'm actually prouder of certain things I've done to just overcome adversity. Um, because I think I didn't get a medal for it, but I'm like, actually, it was higher performance after, because I learned about the journey, about like how to overcome those challenges
That's
and
right.
put the right mindset to perform there and come out of the hole, even though everything's against you. Well, I'm still going to perform, right, and not just go down the drain, right? So that row across the ocean was, at 26 years old, a life changer for sure. It changed my life. It changed my perspective on people and on things and on myself for sure.
And you must have come back with strength and resolve too, after everything that had happened in the previous year and 2 years. And I'm curious if that was one of the catalysts that ended up making you come across the pond and row for Canada.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's the reason why. I've always, again, having two passports, always looked at the team, the Canadian team, with interest. I'm like, oh, I could be, I was in Beijing on the podium while the men's eight was racing right behind me. And
Oh, that's incredible.
looking at it thinking, I could be in that eight as well, right? Because I
Yeah.
can. If I just go on the other side of the ocean.
Mhm.
So it was always there. Something that I wanted to do. What it did, though, rode across the ocean, came back home, and then said, okay, I am not done with rowing. I want to go to Rio. How am I going to do this? And it's a point in time where France was putting together an eight. And back to what I learned about myself on the ocean, and going back to the notion of performance, I'm like, that's something I want to do. Like, that's the why I'm doing the sport. Why I got there as a 14-year-old, a 13-year-old. I started with the eight, like, and I
Mhm.
loved it. And I loved, go out there, create that team, create those bond of like that are staying for life. And I'm like, the eight is the ultimate, like, that's the team boat by definition.
That's right.
And I wanted to row this. And I know at that point in time, Canada was actually not putting the eight up there. So I was like, well, I'm actually going to stay with France, and it'll be what it is. However, even though I had come to, be at make peace with myself and try to make good decisions about how I was going to interact on the team, on the national team. I think I did this through the ocean, but others on the team may not have had that opportunity to do this work with themselves. And
Mhm.
so I came back, and the tensions for those people were probably still there, and um, griefs, and it didn't help. And so, 2014, I started with the national team in France, performed, in my opinion, deserved the spot on the men's 8, but the whole thing was doomed. And the whole process was just made to fail. Like, it was built to not succeed. Again, system change. You can't build a strong 8 if you just focus on if you don't change the system around it. And France was at that point in time not really ready to make a system change. And so, yeah, it didn't work. You had a bunch of individuals rowing for themselves at trials and then trying to put an 8 together. That's why France never really performed well in the quad or in the 8, because we all have a lot of doubles, a lot of pairs that perform very well, maybe up to the 4, but after that, it's too centralized on individuals more than the team. So anyway, got kicked out of the 8, not for performance reasons, but for personal reasons. And at that point in time, I'm like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, what's the next adventure? And I said, you know what? Let's go to Canada. And it was a 2-year project, end of 2014 to 2016. And just packed my bag, put everything in storage, and just landed in Victoria. I've never been in here. And I thought, you know what? Let's live that new adventure. I don't like to have regret. I'm the kind of guy, I hate regrets. And actually, I don't really have a lot of regrets in my life. So I'm like, yeah, let's go there. Let's explore that other side of me.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So yeah, you ended up racing the single, if I recall, all through that summer, I think at the World Cups for Canada. And then you came in the fall of 2014, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was, made the decision to come to Canada a bit, late in that 2014 season. So it was easier to kind of, leave my life behind. I still have a job. I had a job, I had like a place, I had like stuff. It was like just, the team was they had their selection process already. So they already had the quad, they already had the double. So it was just hard to show up and not be in Canada and just leave everything behind. So just, made the commitment to come in September. We agreed that I could row the single. I did all my, I managed myself, put the single on the roof, and just drove around, around Europe, because there it's pretty easy to go from one World Cup to the other. And
that's right.
Just change the unisuit.
I was always so jealous of the Europeans for being able to go to every single regatta that you guys have over there, because it's a few hours on a flight or a few hours in a car by train. So okay, so you moved to Canada, and that fall you end up injuring your back pretty badly, and I know just from you and I interacting that was something that had sort of been bothering you your whole career, but this time it was like actually pretty serious.
Yeah, well, my whole career, I don't know if my whole career, but I think the first real symptoms showed up in, the 2008 kind of year. And then I had started to have like over the quadrennial, like a couple, issues here and there where my back would seize up, or so I knew I had a problem. But I think the deep change in training programs, way of rowing technique, just made my body just, I think that was the hardest part, is my body didn't adapt fast enough. And I think it just triggered the injury that I got in the winter. Actually, it was like the winter of 2015, where I basically the disc just blew up in the back just by coughing at night, and ended up losing my control of my right foot, emergency surgery in Vancouver, and I was told I would never really row again, or at least not at a high level, and that I should think about walking again and being healthy before trying to go to the game. So taking again back to that lessons learned and that approach to performance, I think that's where I want to kind of say, if I have to pick one area of my career where I'm like the most proud of, I think that's that 2015 to 2016. I think that just, to me, that's a gold medal, because you don't come back from that far behind. Like I was barely walking.
I remember that.
Yeah, barely walking, and just had to relearn pretty much everything. Change everything I was doing around training. Like couldn't do squats anymore. Couldn't, like, things that I took for granted suddenly disappeared, and I had to perform again. changed my performance approach, and also my mindset. Like, to me, everything then was step by step, go back to the basics. It's not about the Olympics, forget about them, just like day by day, step by step. And when I say step by step, literally step by step, like physically step by step, from not being able to walk to being able to, walk a little bit, and then sit in the boat, and then go and enjoy Athletic Spring as a, as a senior athlete, and then not really a team athlete, like a national team athlete. So it's like I had to relearn the journey and the path, and all the way to not qualifying and qualifying after, and going and living an experience as a quad that was what I think the why I do the sport, right? Just like go out there and enjoy the sport for what it is, because if you focus on the result again, it's daunting, right? So anyway, was able to qualify the boat in Rio, and race in Rio, which was, to me, a gold medal in itself to just be there.
And just going back for everybody listening to what Julian was saying, so he basically wasn't walking in 2015, or he was having a lot of difficulty walking. And I remember talking to him in the parking lot at Elk Lake, where we were training together, limping out with his wife, telling me like, yeah, my back is completely blown, I have to go and get surgery. And then a few months later, rowing next to him on the water when he was taking his first strokes again. And then in June, going and racing at a World Cup and winning a bronze medal there in the men's quad. And at that point, I mean, I had known that you were a performer, somebody who had, somebody who clearly knew what they were doing. But then to watch you go through that whole roller coaster of like, I don't even know if I could walk properly again, to then getting back into it, and then getting back and selected into a crew, and then going and competing and winning a medal, I was like, this is one tough son of a gun. And at that point, it was like you were the whole package at that point. Like you were a great performer, you were a great teammate, you were a great friend, and you had the resilience of a bull. It was really incredible to watch you come back from that. So I just wanted to throw that out there and let you know that.
Oh, well, thanks, Taylor. Really, really kind. Yeah, but I do think that what you're just describing here is how I think I had learned, taken all those years of mistakes and wins and victories and defeats and everything, kind of like putting it together and just say, I get a year and a half. How can I take the best of everything else and just make it something that can make sense for me and for my team ultimately? And yeah, it takes a lot of work, but I'm really proud of it, because I think it's like, it is the pinnacle. When I say pinnacle of my career, it didn't end up with a gold medal, physical gold medal, but I do think it was like worth the gold medal there. And only me and a couple of people know, but I don't really care. It's a pretty cool. It was a very intense process, and we closed the loop on like my coach smiling and saying, you can be great in the sport. I think great in the sport doesn't necessarily mean the number of gold medals, and I know it can be, and we have the greatest of the sports that have like a ton of gold medals, and they've had their like ups and downs and gone through all of that. But I think great in the sport for me is like, yeah, I really like the sport, and I hope that I can still instill that in people, that this is a great way to be themselves, to be great, to be a greater yourself, and doesn't have to be a gold medal. And I think that's, to me, those year and a half, I became the high performing Julian, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've just been given a master class in resilience here. So yeah, that's really incredible. So we'll slowly start to wrap this up, but you've had obviously an incredible career in regular rowing, and then you got into beach sprints and coastal rowing, and like you said, you hosted the world championships when they were here in Victoria. Do you see 2,000-meter rowing continuing on the way that it is now that we're seeing events starting to be removed, like we've got lightweight events coming away? Do you see that sort of being the direction the sport's going, or do you see it them sort of coexisting together?
It's a great question. my personal belief is that if you don't try to change, someone's going to make the change for you.
Right.
And that's true for any sport. So I think we need to ask ourselves, do we want to be passive and reactive, or do we want to be proactive? I think the addition of coastal rowing is a great way to move the sport into a different direction while keeping as well the history of our sport and staying relevant in the 21st century. So I think there's place for both, and there's probably place for more actually. But that doesn't mean that we need to make it relevant in 21st century. 2,000-meter rowing, yes, that's our DNA. Though you could argue that Oxford Cambridge or Henley Regatta or those events were never on 2,000 meters. So is it the DNA of our sport, or do we need to kind of like look at who we are, where are the values of our sport, and this is what we need to maintain?
Right.
I think I would focus on this. Today we have like technology that can help to do this, all of that. So I think that's incremental change rather than big changes, and be proactive is my big advice. So.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we're even seeing the LA games going from 2,000 meters down to 1,500 meters. So that surely will change, athlete physiology, or maybe even, could potentially affect boat design or rigging, for example. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that shakes out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, for sure. But, Brisbane 2032 will be on 2,000 meters. So I think we still have the 2,000-meter rowing still have some good days ahead of it. But yeah, and I think it's part of the DNA and the value of the sport. Now, does it have to be exactly on 2,000 meter? I think it can be a 1,500, maybe a bit less. We have to be relevant, cut the costs, but also showcase our sport, right? And I think that's where we need more of the showcase, like open the sport, make it a little less intimate, and make it more public friendly,
more spectator friendly.
Yeah, spectator friendly. I want to see. It's impressive. I'm really impressed by what. Of course, there's more money, but Formula One or certain sports have access to a lot of the data, a lot of the information. Like, we need to open the sport. We need to share what's happening in innate. We need to share with the athletes, who they are, what's their, what are the numbers, make it easy for people to understand and relate to, so that they can go in there on the rowing machine in the gym and somewhere, because most people can have access easily to a rowing machine and just be like, oh, okay, that's pretty impressive, right? It's like driving 300 kilometers an hour on the track. Well, when you start driving 150 with your car on the highway, you kind of quickly understand, like, that's pretty impressive to be taking those, the G you take, whatever it is. Like, you want to be able to relate to the data, right? So,
so this summer you're going to be back home in France, and you're going to be doing commentating for CBC.
So I won't be back home. Unfortunately, it's in the studio in Montreal.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's live commentating with all the monitors and everything, and access to the live feed. But it is from the studio in Montreal, and but yeah, we'll be commentating in French. And yeah, I've been pretty stoked, very excited to be doing this. For a number of reasons. I think it's I know the course pretty well, trained there. I still have a lot of friends that are racing, and I think for me it's again a new challenge, a new adventure. I've never really done. I've done a lot of interviewing, a lot of podcasts like this. It's kind of familiar with that, but now commentating is a totally different game, and I think there's training involved and all of this. I'm pretty excited about the process as well, the new learning curve, and you never know. It can open other opportunities, as well as just the ability to share a bit of a passion and love for the sport, and giving that behind the scene, kind of like getting people into the sport, right? Like, kind of telling them what it takes to be there,
right? And
how great our athletes in general and our Canadian athletes are, and what they do to get there, and sharing those stories. You just allowed me to share my story. Well, I'm pretty excited to go out there and share the stories of our athletes, showcase what they do, and I think people can hopefully relate to this. So that'll be great.
Yeah, well, Julian, thank you very much for sharing all this with us. It's always incredible. You train with somebody for a certain amount of time. I mean, you and I have known each other for 10 years, and I don't know if I've really known in intimate detail a lot of the things you just shared with us today. So I want to thank you for that. the last question that I have, if you could give any advice to anybody who's coming up through the ranks right now or has any big goals coming up, what parting words would you give to them?
Um, I think really focus on the journey, refocus on the day, refocus on what you're doing now, but just put it in perspective, right? Try to get that perspective because it only makes sense if it's part of a bigger plan. Um, it won't, the work, the gift, the how you get there, how you got into the sport, all of that is relevant. But I think ultimately the big difference is just you gotta be in there every day, and there's no short. You can't take shortcuts. There's no shortcut, right? And I think the shortcuts you're going to create are because you're going to fast forward because you're going to focus on every day. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Asking questions are not a bad thing. They're the why. You're trying to understand the why. We all need the why. We need to define our why, and then we need to understand other people's why so that we can actually fit in and make sense of the whole thing. So that's my big advice. And then just be kind with yourself. Just understand that whatever sport you do, and if it's rowing, well, yeah, it's just bigger than the sport. Ultimately, you have to be kind with yourself. It's not just about it, right? There's a life after. Take care of your body and just enjoy the sport. There's so much more than just that little goal that you have. So enjoy.
That's great, Julian. Well, thank you very much for sharing all that with us. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you would like to see more content like this, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe.